Hi, Steve. What's your opinion about the upcoming midterm election and the future of the GOP party in 2028? The race between Marco Rubio and JD Vance. What's your opinion about it?
Great question. You know, projecting the future is always complicated. Let me put it this way. I think that the Republican Party has some real headwinds, has some real challenges in winning, particularly the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives, we know, is, you know, there's a Japanese word called hakuchu, which means parity. We're at parity, you know, split sides by just a couple of seats. And so right now, I think traditionally in American politics, in what we call midterm elections, the president's party usually doesn't do well, so that's one problem. Secondly, I think the economic headwinds, one of the number one issue for Americans is the cost of living, affordability, the perceptions of inflation. And where I know we're going to talk about the Iran conflict has returned to Americans their anxiety about cost of living and can they make it. So I think that is going to drive some successes for the Democrats vis-a-vis the Republicans in the House of Representatives. I think structurally, for very complex reasons, it is very hard for the Democrats to win the Senate. They could, but structurally, this particular election, given the states involved, I can't imagine. But it does mean that likely the Senate is going to be closer. The Republicans can still controlling. But, you know, I could be very wrong on these issues. But I think that, you know, one of the things that's happening is this is happening because there has been concern about some of President Trump's policies, particularly the violence that we saw in Minneapolis, the cost of living, these kinds of things. So that it is an anti-Trump movement more than a pro-Democrat movement. And the problem is the Democrats continue to be deeply divided without what I consider to be a cohesive, coherent message that works for Americans. You have the success of Mamdani in New York, who is a declared socialist. You know, and then you have Tallarico and others. You have some more moderate Democrats, particularly in New Jersey and the governor of Virginia, that have come in. But the Democratic Party doesn't know where to go. So I think that's interesting. They could win even though they have no message, which means that's a weak win in my view. Oh, and then, did I answer the full question?
And the future of the GOP party in 2028, the race between JD Vance and Marco Rubio.
That is a really fascinating question. I think it is going to be messy for the Republican Party to find an heir to Trump. Donald Trump is singularly different in American politics. His base supports him no matter what, and I don't think that mantle is easily going to transfer to someone else. So my view is, you mentioned JD Vance, you mentioned Marco Rubio, I bet you there are 5 or 6 others that we haven't even thought about who enter, and they're all going to be knifing each other and going after each other, trying to succeed Donald Trump and the magic that Donald Trump had with his base. And I think it's going to be a bloody, not literally, metaphorically bloody, messy, politically complicated period of time. I could be wrong. Maybe one of them emerges, but I don't think it'll just be Marco and JD Vance. I think it'll be, you know, right now, Marco Rubio looks very strong this week, you know, but last week JD Vance looked weak, you know, so you're going back and forth. And then there are other governors. Americans, you know, it's interesting, Americans. Sometimes, you know, the most often, you know, in succeeding a president, vice presidents, you know, usually have an edge. So you would say, oh, J.D. Vance will automatically be part of there. Very few secretaries of state come in. And Americans really don't like to vote for senators and things. They like to vote for governors. They like to vote for people that are close to them. And we don't know how that cast is going to look. But my view is it's the question of how much power Trump will continue to have over his legacy. If his power declines significantly after the midterm elections, he becomes a genuine lame duck, then I think you're going to have a free-for-all of people going after each other. If Trump maintains this power even after he loses the election, Trump is not a normal president, right? He's an unusual thing. The normal gravity may not apply. And if Trump remains very, very strong, we may not know who's going to succeed him for a little while because, you know, Trump is going to want to keep his cards close. He's going to flirt with J.D. Vance. He's going to flirt with Marco Rubio. He may go flirt with someone else, and so that's what I think will happen.
Thanks a lot.
What American people think about Meloni's government?
Most American people don't know about Meloni's government, but I would say that Meloni has done a very, very good job, probably the best in Europe, of situating Italy as a solid partner of the United States. Now, I know Meloni has had some distance from Trump on Iran, but on Russia, Ukraine, on everything there, she has really stood out as someone solidly support. I think Meloni has done more to restore trust and confidence in the U.S.-Italy relationship than any leader I can remember in Italy. I think there are stress points, but I think she's been remarkably good at managing and tending this relationship. In some ways, is what I think about in Japan with Takaichi, the new prime minister. She's also been very good. She's newer than Meloni, but in a way, the way in which Meloni and now Takaichi are managing that relationship so well, and that doesn't mean by being obsequious to America. It's like being bold, upfront, straightforward, and there's a level of trust there that I think is very good. And I admire Meloni's differences. I mean, I think she feels like Italy should have been talked to before the Iran strikes. I agree with her, actually. But I have a lot of respect for her, and I think she's done an excellent job. So to the strategic military class and the economic class of people here, Italy is very much on the map. I think to average Americans, they don't know about Italy except going to Rome and Venice and Milan, so.
In Italy, we have a problem with socialist cultural hegemony in justice, in the justice, in the university, in the media. What's the advice you can do to the Italian conservatism to overcome this situation?
So this is a great question, and it's complicated. My view is democracy is a struggle over ideas, and it is important for rising political parties to confront and wrestle with their opposition. Democracy is not a kumbaya sport. It's a sport where you have to respect the other side. They get their chance to speak too, but you've got to be out there and engaged. And what I find both in the United States, I see it in Europe, is you have institutions that have developed orthodoxies, that have taken over those institutions, and people pay a price if they don't subscribe to those orthodoxies. I think those need to be challenged directly. You should be in the gambit, and we should use, the power of media, of the spotlight, not to say, oh, the more conservative angle is right, but the more conservative angle deserves the chance to have a legitimate, fair debate with alternative perspectives and views. And those people that block that are actually anti-democratic. They're anti-inquiry, and I think that's a problem. So my view is, I think that's happening more in American college campuses, in politics, but it means where I disagree with some things that happen in America, it doesn't mean that you get to be the dominant one and exclude everyone. You need to demonstrate a magnanimity, an example of being able to show that you may be able to succeed and to out-debate and outperform and deliver for people to do that. But you got to always continue to engage people. So that's what I would recommend. I think journalism, so many of you are connected to journalism, your newspaper that many of you are here about, does that, right? So that is the example that I think. And I think everybody in these debates sometimes forgets it's important to keep a wide aperture and to hear the other side. Sometimes we're just broadcasting a view. But, it's important, to struggle through these.
Thank you.
Is this helpful?
How do you see the future of conservatism in Western societies, and specifically in Europe?
God, I don't know Europe as well. I go to Europe a lot, but I wouldn't pretend to be a great expert on the tectonics of political fissures. I would tell you that from my perspective, and what little I know, the conservative movements in many places in Europe have long been minority movements. They've been more on the fringe, and overwhelmingly the European model was a social welfare model that was the dominant model. I think that the stress of these times is killing that model and destroying it, and you're having to invent new things. It's anti-innovation, it's anti-private sector, and so you have to develop new models that bring that on. And if conservative movements are smart, they will figure out how to make societies more nimble, how they reward merit, how they reward people who are willing to take risks, on behalf of these things, and sort of rise by the power of that, because these old social welfare models are breaking down and not delivering, and they're incredibly costly to societies, in my view, as they are falling behind. And we have that struggle going on in the United States right now. There's a real debate. I mean, it's, clearly, I kind of feel like America is a schizophrenic country. It depends on where you're at, on this. And I think that kind of process is going to be part of whether the conservative movements have to get in and fight, and it's going to have to deliver to people a sense that they have power and agency in a confusing time, right? And a lot of people want to cling to the safety of the old model, even though that old model is stale and kind of bankrupt. Any others?
Yeah, we have the last questions because then we have to go to.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Steve, the current conflict in Iran has exposed a fascinating and perhaps dangerous fault line with the MAGA movement. We are seeing a tough war between America First isolationists who feel this betrayal of the no more forever wars promise, and the loyalty hawks who view this as an intervention of an necessary projection of strength. So what is your opinion? What should Trump do with the MAGA base of Iran war?
Great question, and I don't know if I have a good answer. I think very few people who knew the focus of the MAGA base and Donald Trump's focus on America First would have predicted this action with Iran. There's a lot of contradictions in this moment. For instance, the MAGA base, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was part of that, clearly, before this conflict began, had a problem with that. So you see Megyn Kelly, famous broadcaster, you see Tucker Carlson, you see Marjorie Taylor Greene, others that are big opponents of President Trump's actions on Iran and the partnership with Israel on Iran. That said, the truth is the polls show MAGA 90% supports Donald Trump. And so it's really interesting. So it seems they support Trump no matter what, without regard to the content of what Trump does. But there are leaders in that party who could erode that over time. I mean, the fact is Tucker Carlson is powerful. Marjorie Taylor Greene is, making a point. And I remember in cases with Obama on Afghanistan, Obama continued to deploy significant U.S. troops in Afghanistan, even when the Democratic Party was opposed to it, because there was overwhelming Republican support. I was actually involved in helping with Grover Norquist, I know someone you know, to impact Republican support for that so that it fell. And when Republican support fell, that's when they began shrinking the U.S. presence in Afghanistan. So when you kind of look at the country right now, 12% of Democrats support this war. That's unbelievably split, and 44% of Americans overall support the war. So almost half, but not quite half. But I think with the MAGA base, Trump doesn't seem to be vulnerable with that particular part of the public right now. The issue is, when we went to war in Iraq, we deployed 150,000 troops. They've sent 2,000 troops from the 82nd Airborne Division to the region, the so-called boots on the ground, much smaller, but if they send those troops inside Iran, it's going to awaken a debate. Oh, are we in a quagmire? Has it launched something that many will argue was not in America's national interest? Others will say, Iran was restarting its nuclear program, blah, blah. Others will say, hey, we wanted regime change. There's been a sloppiness that the president and the White House have had articulating what the national interests were. But to your question, MAGA doesn't seem to care right now. Leaders in MAGA do, and I think that the price for the president is one, he's got to figure out what the story is. He's got to be upfront with Americans as to what America's stakes are in it, what are the limits. I mean, I think one of the things that Trump was really great at was the 12-day war. Americans saw a conflict begun. Every American president was afraid of taking the action against Iran's nuclear facilities and bombing them. But then he ended it. Like the equation used to be, if Biden did this, if Obama did this, if George Bush did this, they would get into the war they couldn't extract themselves from. But he not only stopped it, he ordered Israeli bombers to return. And that act did more to bolster Trump's popularity that, wow, we had a conflict, but you controlled it. So I think the thing that would undermine Trump with the MAGA base is if he doesn't demonstrate that ability to control the situation. If he looks like he's getting dragged into something that's a quagmire that he can't get out of, then his popularity will probably go down, even with the people that are giving him the benefit of the doubt right now. And it's going to be interesting to see, because we've seen muscling up. But I got to tell you, he keeps mentioning Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and Hegseth clearly is a cheerleader for this war. Rubio, maybe, but not as flamboyant, and Rubio's now trying to put the pieces together. You've got Witkoff and Jared Kushner trying to negotiate deals. My prediction is Hegseth at some point gets expelled. I think he will get expelled because he looks and sounds like a warmonger, somebody who wanted the conflict for the reasons. That is neither Donald Trump's view, not Marco Rubio's view, not J.D. Vance's view, and not MAGA's view. And so what's interesting is to watch that divide between Trump saying Hegseth is the one who wanted it most. So that framing, in my mind, is making Hegseth expendable, right? It's leaving Trump's options open as he changes course. So that is one of the things that might happen.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks.